They say the greatest healers are born with gentle hands and patient hearts. But Marin had learned that the most dangerous gift wasn't the ability to heal, it was knowing exactly how to kill. Every pressure point that could save a life could also end one. Every herb that dulled pain could bring eternal sleep. And the blood that ran through her veins wasn't entirely human, no matter how carefully she bled red when she cut herself in front of others. 15 years. 5,475 days of swallowing the truth like poison, letting it burn through her throat every single morning, when she woke in the cramped servants' quarters of Valehaven's charity hospital. 15 years of binding her true nature so tightly beneath this borrowed skin that sometimes she forgot which parts of her were real and which were the carefully constructed lie. She had been 12 when she'd stumbled through Valehaven's gates, a child covered in ash and blood that wasn't hers, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back, and a secret that would get her burned alive if anyone discovered it. The hospital's head physician, old Master Corvin, had seen something in her desperate eyes, perhaps pity, perhaps recognition of a fellow soul running from something. He'd given her a pallet in the servants' hall and taught her to clean wounds, set bones, prepare poultices. He never asked about the strange way injuries seemed to close faster under her touch, never questioned why patients assigned to her care recovered from infections that should have killed them, never wondered aloud why she never fell ill, despite tending to plague victims in poison cases that felled other healers within days. Master Corvin had died 3 years ago, taking his silent questions to the grave. Now, at 27 or whatever age meant to something like her, Marin moved through Valehaven's hospital corridors like a ghost, present but unseen, essential but unacknowledged. The other healers called her lucky, another cruel irony that made her want to laugh until she wept. Lucky, because she could touch a festering wound and sense exactly which herbs would draw out the poison. Lucky, because she could lay her palm against a fevered forehead and know whether the patient would live or die before dawn. Lucky, because while other healers studied for decades to master their craft, knowledge seemed to flow into her like water finding its level, instinctive, undeniable, and completely unexplainable to anyone who didn't know what she truly was. A deep blood. One of the ancient healing caste, born with the ability to sense life force itself, to manipulate the very essence that kept hearts beating and lungs breathing. Her people had been exterminated 20 years ago during the cleansing, when the Church of the Radiant Path declared them abominations, creatures who held too much power over life and death, who played at being gods with their ability to pull souls back from the brink or push them gently over the edge. The Church had been thorough. Marin knew she was likely the last, the only one who'd survived by being young enough, small enough, unremarkable enough to slip through their nets of fire and steel. The morning started like any other 3 bone-setting procedures, 2 cases of marsh fever, and 1 nobleman's son who'd drunk himself into near-fatal alcohol poisoning. Marin worked through them mechanically, her hands steady, even as exhaustion pulled at her bones. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, but deep bloods didn't need sleep the way humans did. Another secret to swallow, another difference to hide. She was grinding valerian root in the preparation room when the bells started ringing. Not the gentle chimes that called the faithful to prayer, but the deep bronze war bells that hung silent except in times of crisis. Their sound rolled across Valehaven like thunder, making the glass vials on her shelves rattle and the mortar shake in her hands. "Battle," whispered Jana, one of the younger healers, appearing white-faced in the doorway. "They're saying the king's regiment was ambushed at Widow's Pass. Survivors are being brought to every hospital in the city." The king. Marin's hands stilled. King Dashin Wolfheart, the Alpha who'd taken the throne 8 years ago after his mother's assassination. The warrior king who'd spent those years fighting border wars and crushing rebellions, who supposedly carried a curse in his bloodline that made his wolf stronger and more savage than any other. She'd never seen him, had made certain of it. Alpha wolves had senses beyond human, and while her disguise had fooled physicians and priests, she'd never wanted to test it against someone whose very nature was to hunt and detect threats. "How many?" she asked, forcing her voice steady. "They don't know. Dozens at least. Maybe more." Jana's hands twisted in her apron. "Marin. They're saying the king himself is among us, wounded." The preparation room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Marin turned back to her grinding, but her enhanced senses picked up what Jana couldn't hear: the thunder of hooves approaching at desperate speed, the shouts of guards clearing the streets, the underlying scent of blood carried on the wind. So much blood. Get the surgical theater ready, Marin said quietly. Boil every instrument we have. Prepare beds in the overflow ward. We'll need all the clean linens from storage. And send someone to the apothecary for more wound-packing moss and yarrow. Jana nodded and fled. Marin stood alone in the preparation room, her reflection staring back from the copper distillation apparatus. Brown hair pulled severely back, ordinary gray eyes, sun-weathered skin marked with old burn scars from her early days learning to work the ovens. Nothing remarkable, nothing that would make anyone look twice, but beneath that carefully maintained surface, her deep-blood senses were already extending outward like invisible fingers, feeling for the approaching injured. She could sense their life forces even from this distance, some burning bright and steady, others flickering like candles in a storm wind, and one that blazed like the sun itself, fierce and wild and fighting against the darkness trying to drag it down. An alpha's life force, unmistakable in its intensity, but wounded badly enough that even that tremendous vitality was beginning to fade. The doors to the hospital burst open. The flood of injured had begun, and Marin felt her careful, hidden life start to crack like ice under too much weight. They brought the king in last, carried on a blood-soaked stretcher by 4 guards, whose faces were gray with exhaustion and grief. Marin had been working for 6 hours straight by then, moving between patients with ruthless efficiency. 17 men she'd stabilized. 4 she'd lost, despite everything she could do without revealing her true nature. Each death was a weight on her chest, but she couldn't afford to feel it. Not yet. Critical patient, the head guard shouted. Where's your best surgeon? Dead from plague 2 months ago, called back healer Osmond from across the ward, his hands buried in another soldier's abdominal wound. We're down to who we have. Put him anywhere there's space. The guards hesitated, looking at their king's pale face. Even covered in blood and dirt, Dacian Wolfheart was remarkable tall enough that his legs hung off the stretcher, with the kind of build that came from years of actual combat rather than ceremonial sword-waving. His hair was dark brown, nearly black, plastered to his skull with sweat and blood. A jagged wound ran from his collarbone down across his chest, deep enough that Marin could see the white of bone through torn flesh and armor. But it was the other wound that made her breath catch a blackened puncture in his side that wept dark blood and gave off a smell that turned her stomach. Poison. Not just any poison, but something she recognized from her people's old texts. Shadowbane, made from roots that grew only in cursed ground, specifically designed to target shapeshifters and beings with enhanced healing. Here, Marin heard herself say. Bring him to the far corner, the isolated room. The guards looked at her, this unremarkable healer in a blood-stained apron, and hesitated. But another healer, exhausted beyond reason, just pointed. That's Marin. If anyone can save him, she can. She's pulled off miracles before. They carried him to the isolation room, barely more than a closet, really, but it had a door that could close, a window for light, and most importantly, privacy. Marin followed, her mind already racing through what she'd need. Shadowbane had no conventional cure. It was designed to be fatal, to shut down the enhanced healing that made alpha wolves so difficult to kill. But deep bloods weren't bound by conventional medicine. Everyone, out, she said as they laid the king on the narrow bed. I need space to work. We're not leaving the king alone with... One guard started. Then watch him die. Marin interrupted coldly. Because I can't save him with you breathing down my neck and blocking the light. Your choice. The guards looked at each other. Their king's breathing had become a wet rattle, blood bubbling at his lips. The decision made itself. 5 minutes, the senior guard said grimly. We'll be right outside, if anything seems wrong. You'll hear me scream. I know. Marin was already moving, pulling out bottles and instruments. Now go. The door closed. She was alone with the dying Alpha King. Marin pressed her fingers to his throat, feeling for his pulse. It was there but erratic, his wolf fighting the poison while his human side tried to heal the physical wounds. The two halves of his nature were working against each other, canceling out, leaving him vulnerable. She had seconds to decide. Let him die and maintain her secret, or save him and risk everything. His eyes opened barely a slit, but enough for her to see they were amber brown shot through with gold, and they fixed on her face with an intensity that stopped her heart. Deep blood? He whispered, his voice barely audible. I can smell your truth. Then his hand shot up with the last of his strength, his fingers locking around her wrist like iron shackles. Marin Whitewood, he said, and her true name, the one she hadn't heard spoken in 15 years, fell from his lips like a bomb. Daughter of Iris, the merciful. Last of the healing caste. His eyes rolled back and he went limp. But his grip on her wrist remained. And Marin realized she'd just lost everything. Her true name hung in the air like smoke. For 10 heartbeats, Marin couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the single thought screaming through her mind. He knows, he knows, he knows. But he was unconscious now, his grip on her wrist loosening as the poison dragged him deeper into darkness. In minutes, he'd be dead. And dead men told no secrets. She could let him go. Should let him go. Every instinct for self-preservation that had kept her alive for 15 years demanded it. Her hands moved anyway, pulling back his ruined armor to expose the wounds fully. The blade cut was severe but manageable. The Shadowbane poisoning was the real threat. She could see the black veins spreading from the puncture wound, crawling up toward his heart like dark lightning. "Damn you," she whispered to the unconscious king. "Damn you for knowing. Damn you for making me choose." She couldn't use her full power, not with guards right outside the door. But she didn't need to. Deep blood healing wasn't flashy, it was subtle, working with the body's own life force rather than against it. She placed one palm over his heart and the other over the poisoned wound, closed her eyes, and let herself feel. There his life force, that blazing sun she'd sensed earlier, now flickering and unstable. And there, the poison, a foreign corruption trying to smother it. In her mind's eye, she saw how they interacted, saw the exact points where the Shadowbane was disrupting his wolf's natural healing. She began to work, using her gift carefully. Precisely. Not healing him directly that would leave traces, evidence. Instead, she guided his own life force, showed his wolf where to direct its energy, helped his body recognize and isolate the poison. She was just assisting, nudging, absolutely nothing that couldn't be explained as conventional medicine combined with an alpha's natural resilience. The Shadowbane fought back, but she was patient. Minutes passed. Outside, she could hear the guards growing restless, their footsteps pacing. Her time was running out. Finally, the black veins stopped spreading. Then, slowly, they began to recede. Marin pulled back, dizzy from the exertion. The king's breathing had steadied, his color improving from corpse gray to merely deathly pale. He'd live. His wolf would take care of the rest, now that the immediate crisis had passed. She was reaching for conventional bandages when his hand caught her wrist again. This time his eyes were clear, sharp, and fixed on her face, with an expression she couldn't read. "You saved me," he said, his voice stronger. "Why? It's what I do," she replied flatly, trying to pull away. His grip tightened. Deep Bloods were executed for treason. For conspiring against the crown. The church declared them abominations 20 years ago, and my mother... He stopped, something flickering across his face. "My mother signed the execution order. You should have let me die." "Perhaps I should have." Marin met his eyes steadily. "But I took an oath to heal, not to judge. Even kings who inherit their mother's blood-stained crowns." A knock at the door. "Time's up," the guard called. "We're coming in." Dacian's eyes never left hers. "You'll attend the royal hall tonight. There's to be a council meeting about the ambush. I require a personal physician present." "I'm a charity hospital healer, Your Majesty. Surely you have court physicians." "Who couldn't save me?" His voice dropped lower. "You will come." "That's not a request." The door opened. Guards flooded in, relief washing over their faces when they saw their king conscious and breathing. They didn't notice him release her wrist, didn't see the warning in his gold-flecked eyes. But Marin understood perfectly. He was giving her a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Attend the council meeting, or be hunted as a fugitive deep blood who'd been discovered in hiding. As the guards helped him sit up, beginning to fuss over him, she slipped from the room unnoticed. Or so she thought, until she reached the main ward and found someone waiting. A woman in pristine white robes marked with silver thread stood by the entrance, her presence making every healer in the vicinity unconsciously draw back. She was perhaps 40, with hair gone prematurely silver and eyes like chips of ice. Around her waist, a belt of iron chains clinked softly. Inquisitor Revna Coldwater, High Examiner of the Church of the Radiant Path. I heard the king was brought here, Revna said, her voice pleasant and mild, in a way that made Marin's skin crawl. Poisoned with shadowbane, they say. A miracle he survived, given how rare the antidote is. Her cold eyes found Marin's. Tell me, child, what's your name? The main ward had gone quiet, every healer and patient watching the exchange. Marin felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure, but it was nothing compared to the Inquisitor's gaze, sharp, calculating, seeing too much. Marin, your grace, she said, keeping her eyes lowered respectfully. Just a healer. Just a healer. Revna repeated, tasting the words. How modest, yet the guards tell me you insisted on treating the king personally. Sent them away. Worked alone behind a closed door. She took a step closer, iron chains clinking. That seems rather bold for someone who's just a healer. The king was dying. Marin forced her voice to remain steady, even as her deep blood senses screamed warnings. The Inquisitor wore iron not as decoration but as protection, specifically against the kind of beings who could manipulate life force. Would your grace have preferred I let him bleed out while we debated hospital hierarchy? A few nervous laughs from the other healers, quickly silenced when Revna's gaze swept the room. Of course not. I'm merely curious. The Inquisitor circled Marin slowly, like a wolf circling prey. You see, shadowbane poisoning should be fatal to an alpha wolf. The records are quite clear, yet His Majesty not only lives but is already conscious and giving orders. That's extraordinary. His Majesty's constitution is extraordinary, Marin replied. Alpha wolves are notoriously difficult to kill. I simply cleaned the wound, packed it with yarrow and golden seal to draw infection, and kept him stable while his own nature did the rest. Yarrow and golden seal. Revna stopped directly in front of her. Nothing else? No unusual methods? The church has been tracking strange occurrences lately. Miraculous healings. Patients recovering from injuries that should have killed them. All clustered around this particular hospital. Marin's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. Your Grace, if you're suggesting our healers are somehow incompetent at recording natural recoveries, I'm suggesting, Revna interrupted softly, that something unnatural is at work, and unnatural things must be examined. Tested. Her hand moved to the iron chains at her waist. Perhaps you would consent to a simple demonstration? Iron is harmless to humans, after all. Merely uncomfortable to touch for those with impure bloodlines. The trap was elegant. Refuse and confirm suspicion. Accept and be burned by the iron, revealing her nature just as surely. That won't be necessary. The voice rang through the ward with absolute authority. Every head turned toward the entrance, where King Dacian stood pale, leaning heavily on his guards, but upright and conscious. He should have been unconscious for hours, but here he was, his amber gold eyes blazing with barely contained fury. Your Majesty! Revna's surprise was genuine, quickly masked with concern. You shouldn't be out of bed. Your wounds are being managed by my personal physician. He gestured at Marin without looking away from the Inquisitor. The same physician who will accompany me back to the palace, immediately. Your Majesty! I merely thought to ensure. I am quite certain, Inquisitor Coldwater, that the Church's concern for my welfare is touching. His voice could have frozen wine. However, I am equally certain that the woman who saved my life, who pulled me back from the edge of death when your priests were still preparing funeral rites, has earned my personal protection. The word protection rang through the ward like a bell toll. A king's protection, witnessed by dozens. It was a public claim, a line drawn in the sand between Marin and anyone who might threaten her. Revna's eyes narrowed, but she dipped her head. Of course, Your Majesty, I meant no offense. I simply perform my duty to root out corruption wherever. Your duty, Dacian interrupted, his wolf rising close enough to the surface that his eyes flashed pure gold for an instant. does not extend to harassing royal physicians or questioning my judgment. Are we clear? A long, tense moment. Then Revna smiled cold, calculated, and completely false. Perfectly clear, Your Majesty. I merely hope your trust is not misplaced. She swept from the ward, iron chains clinking, leaving a chill in her wake. The moment she was gone, Dacian's legs buckled. His guards caught him, and Marin found herself rushing forward despite her better judgment. You fool, she hissed, pressing her hand to his forehead, burning hot fever setting in as his body fought the remaining poison. You should be in bed, not standing in public playing politics. Had to, he managed, his eyes meeting hers. She would have tested you. So you've just made me your personal physician? Without asking? Would you rather face the iron? She wanted to argue, to rage at him for trapping her further. But he'd also just saved her from immediate exposure, had placed himself between her and the church, despite being barely alive. Get him back to bed, she ordered the guards. Then, before she could stop herself, I'll gather my things. If I'm to be a royal physician, I'll need access to better supplies than this charity hospital can provide. As they carried him back to the isolation room, Dacian caught her eye one last time. There was a question there, unspoken but clear. Why did you really save me? She had no answer. Only the certainty that both their lives had just become infinitely more complicated. The royal palace of Valehaven rose like a crown of white stone above the city, its towers catching the last rays of sunset. Marin had walked past it 1,000 times in 15 years, always keeping her distance, always making herself invisible. Now she rode through its gates in the king's personal carriage, her meager belongings in a single pack, her heart hammering against her ribs. They'd given her chambers in the East Wing rooms more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever lived, with actual glass windows, a bed large enough for 3 people, and a private bathing room. It felt like a cage wrapped in silk. A servant arrived as she was unpacking her medical supplies. His Majesty requests your presence in his private chambers, Healer Marin, for examination of his wounds. Of course he did. Because a public claim of protection wasn't enough, he wanted answers, and he wanted them in private where her secrets couldn't hide behind professional distance. The king's chambers occupied the entire top floor of the south tower. 2 guards flanked the entrance, but they let her pass without question. Inside, she found rooms that spoke of a man who spent little time in them: sparse furniture, weapons on every wall, books stacked haphazardly on every surface. The bed looked barely slept in. Dacian stood by the window, shirtless, his torso wrapped in fresh bandages, already showing signs of blood seepage. He'd dismissed his personal servants, leaving them alone. Your Majesty should be lying down, Marin said, moving immediately to professional assessment. The journey from the hospital. How did you know my name? She stopped. Everyone knows the king's name, Your Majesty. Not mine. Mine. He turned to face her, and in the dying light, his eyes were more gold than brown. When I was delirious from poison, I told you something. My wolf recognized you, spoke, through me. I have fragments of memory. I called you by your true name, and you responded as if you'd heard it before. Marin's hand stilled on her medical bag. This was it, the moment where 15 years of hiding would either hold or shatter completely. I don't know what you mean, Your Majesty. Liar. The word wasn't angry, just tired. He moved to a chair, sitting with a grimace. I can smell lies, Marin. It's a gift that's made me a rather effective king and a terrible dinner guest. Right now, the scent coming off you is so thick with deception, I can barely breathe. Then perhaps Your Majesty should stop asking questions he doesn't want answered. Oh, I want answers. He leaned forward, fixing her with that unsettling gold-flecked gaze. I want to know how a deep blood, a member of a race supposedly exterminated 20 years ago, has been hiding in my city for 15 years. I want to know if you're here to assassinate me, to spy for enemies, or if you're simply the last survivor of my mother's genocide, trying desperately to stay alive. The word genocide hung in the air like poison. Your mother, Marin said quietly, signed the order that murdered my entire family. My mother, who could heal broken spines. My father, who could cure plague with a touch. My sister, who was 7 years old, and whose only crime was being born with a gift she barely understood. The church burned them alive while I hid in a cellar, listening to them scream. She hadn't meant to say it. 15 years of silence, and the truth just spilled out like blood from a wound. Dacian's face went carefully blank. I was 15 when my mother issued that order. I begged her not to. Told her the Deep Bloods were healers, not threats. She said, he stopped, jaw tightening. She said that anyone who could heal could also kill with the same knowledge. That your people held too much power over life and death. That she'd received intelligence about a Deep Blood conspiracy to poison the royal family. There was no conspiracy. Marin's voice shook with barely contained rage. That was a lie manufactured by the church to justify their purge. Your mother wanted to consolidate power, and my people stood in her way because we refused to weaponize our gifts. So she killed us all and took our lands, our libraries, our resources. I know. The quiet admission stopped her cold. I found the evidence 5 years ago, Dacian continued, his voice heavy. After I took the throne, hidden in my mother's private papers, letters from church officials discussing how to eliminate the Deep Blood problem. Fabricated intelligence reports. Plans to seize your people's healing sanctuaries and convert them to military hospitals. His hands clenched into fists. By the time I discovered the truth, it was 20 years too late. Everyone thought the Deep Bloods were extinct. I couldn't undo what she'd done. Marin stared at him, this king who carried his mother's crimes like chains. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know, he met her eyes, and because I want you to understand that I'm not her, that I've spent 5 years trying to undo her damage, to build something better, that I don't want to be the king who exterminates innocents, I want to be the king who protects them. Pretty words, Marin said bitterly. But I'm still here in your palace, trapped by a public claim I never asked for, with an inquisitor who suspects what I am. How exactly is this protection? It's imperfect. He stood, moving toward her with surprising steadiness. But it's real. Revna Coldwater is relentless, Marin. If I hadn't claimed you publicly, she'd have hauled you to the church's examination cells within the hour. Iron burns, holy water, starvation. They have methods for breaking through concealment spells and disguises. You'd have been exposed and executed by dawn. So instead, I'm exposed and imprisoned here. You're alive. He stopped an arm's length away. And as long as you're under my protection, the church can't touch you. Yes, you're trapped. Yes, Revna will be watching. But you're alive, which is more than you'd be otherwise. She wanted to argue, to rage at him, but he was right, and they both knew it. Why do you care? She asked finally. I'm nothing to you, just another subject, another problem to manage. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to identify, but unmistakably there. My wolf recognized you, he said quietly. In that hospital. Dying from poison, my wolf looked at you and knew. Deep Bloods and alpha wolves. He trailed off, shaking his head. There are old stories about how our kinds were once linked, how the first healers and the first wolves were created as complements, balance. Fairy tales, Marin said, but her voice lacked conviction, because she'd felt it too, in that moment when she'd touched his life force. A resonance, like two notes in perfect harmony. Recognition on a level deeper than conscious thought. Perhaps. He turned back to the window. Or perhaps some fairy tales carry truth our ancestors knew, and we've forgotten. Either way, you saved my life today, Marin Whitewood. You gave me a second chance I probably don't deserve. The least I can do is try to give you the same. He was offering her something fragile and imperfect, but genuine. A chance to stop running, to stop hiding, to exist in the open even if it meant navigating a palace full of danger. Your bandages need changing, she said finally, pulling supplies from her bag. Professional distance. Safe ground. And you need rest. Whatever conversation this is can continue after you're not actively bleeding through your dressings. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Is that your medical opinion, healer? It's common sense, Your Majesty, which seems to be in short supply around here. As she worked on his wounds, unwrapping soaked bandages to check the healing progress, she felt it, again that strange resonance between them. His wolf responded to her presence, his body healing faster under her touch even though she was using only conventional methods. And her own deep-blood nature, so carefully suppressed for 15 years, stirred in recognition of something ancient and familiar. They were dangerous to each other, she realized, not in the way the church feared, but in a deeper, more fundamental way. Because if old stories held any truth, if deep bloods and alpha wolves really were created as complementary forces, then they were standing at the edge of something that could either save them both or destroy everything. The wound is healing well, she said, applying fresh bandages with steady hands. The Shadowbane is almost purged from your system. You'll be back to full strength in a few days. Thanks to you. Thanks to your own constitution. I merely helped things along. He caught her wrist as she reached for more bandages, his grip gentle but firm. Marin, I know what you did. I could feel it, your power, guiding mine. You risked exposure to save someone whose family destroyed yours. That's not something I'll forget. His thumb traced unconsciously over her pulse point, and she felt her life force respond, reaching toward his like a flower turning toward the Sunday. She pulled away, more disturbed by her own reaction than his touch. Your Majesty needs rest. I'll check on you in the morning. Dacian, he said quietly. When we're alone, you can call me Dacian. She fled before she could respond, before she could acknowledge the intimacy he was offering. Because kings and healers, wolves and deep bloods didn't have that kind of relationship. They couldn't. History had proven it ended only in blood and ashes. But as she lay in her too-large bed that night, staring at a ceiling painted with stars, she couldn't stop thinking about the way his wolf had recognized her, about old stories and forgotten truths, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could write a different ending than the one history had given them. Outside her window, she caught a glimpse of white robes moving through the courtyard gardens. Inquisitor Revna, walking the palace grounds despite the late hour, her eyes lifted toward the east wing, where Marin's windows glowed with lamplight. The hunt had begun, and Marin was no longer invisible. 3 days passed in uneasy peace. Marin attended Dacian each morning and evening, changing dressings and monitoring his recovery with professional efficiency, while carefully maintaining emotional distance. He healed with startling speed. His alpha constitution combined with her subtle interventions worked faster than either factor alone should have allowed. By the 4th day, he was back to attending council meetings and reviewing troop deployments. Marin tried to establish a routine within her gilded cage. She cataloged the palace's surprisingly inadequate medical supplies, requisitioned herbs and equipment from the city's apothecaries, and began setting up a proper infirmary in unused East Wing rooms. The work kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, though she couldn't shake the constant feeling of being watched. Because Revna was always there. In corridors when Marin walked to Dacian's chambers, in the gardens when Marin sought fresh air, at council meetings where healers had no business being, observing with those ice-chip eyes that missed nothing. She's gathering evidence, Dacian said one evening as Marin checked his wounds, now barely more than pink scars. Building a case. The church can't move against someone under royal protection without cause, but if she can prove your deep blood through observation alone, then your protection becomes meaningless, Marin finished. And we both look like conspirators. Which is why I've assigned you guards. He gestured to the door where 2 soldiers now stood permanent watch. Royal physician. Security detail. Completely normal, nothing suspicious. It's a prison escort. It's both. He caught her hand as she reached for supplies, his touch sending that now familiar resonance through her. Marin, I'm trying to keep you safe. I've kept myself safe for 15 years, Your Majesty. Dacian, he corrected, his thumb tracing her wrist. And you've kept yourself safe by being invisible. That's no longer an option. A knock interrupted them, a messenger, white-faced and breathless. Your Majesty, there's been an incident in the lower city. The church's examination cells, something escaped. Dacian was on his feet instantly, his alpha instincts snapping to full alert. What do you mean? Escaped? What was being held there? They're not sure, Your Majesty. The cells were designed to hold unusual prisoners. Whatever broke out killed 3 inquisitors and 2 guards. There's blood everywhere, but no bodies, just pieces. Marin felt her blood turn to ice. The church's examination cells were where they took suspected unnatural creatures, anyone who showed signs of magical ability, unusual healing, or resistance to conventional weapons. They were torture chambers, dressed up as investigation facilities, and she'd lived in terror of them for 15 years. Seal the lower city, Dacian ordered. Double the watch. I want search parties in every district by dawn, and get me a full report on what the church was holding in those cells. The messenger fled. Dacian turned to Marin, his expression grim. This is bad. If something dangerous enough to slaughter trained inquisitors is loose in the city, it wasn't an escape. The voice came from the doorway, cold and certain. Revna stepped inside, her white robes pristine despite the late hour, iron chains clinking softly. It was a rescue. Inquisitor Coldwater, Dacian's voice held warning. This is a rescue mounted by someone with intimate knowledge of church protocols and security measures. Revna's eyes fixed on Marin with laser focus. Someone who would have reason to free prisoners from our examination cells. Someone with abilities that would let them bypass iron wards and blessed barriers. Are you accusing my personal physician of mass murder? Dacian's voice dropped to a growl, his wolf rising close to the surface. I'm stating facts, Your Majesty. Revna pulled out a piece of cloth, holding it up to the lamplight. It was stained with blood, but not red. Silver, unmistakable, even in the dim light. This was found at the scene, deep blood essence. The same signature we've been tracking across the city for months. The same signature that surrounds this very palace-like fog. Marin's mind raced. Silver blood meant an injured deep blood, but she'd been in the palace all evening, with guards outside her door and Dacian as witness. She couldn't have been in two places at once, unless there was another deep blood in Valehaven, another survivor. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. She wasn't alone. After 15 years of believing herself the last, someone else had survived, but they'd just committed mass murder and would bring the church's full wrath down on anyone associated with deep blood signatures, including her. I've been in the palace all evening, Marin said, forcing her voice steady. The guards outside my chambers can testify to that. Whatever happened in the lower city. Oh, I don't think you physically committed the crime, Revna interrupted smoothly. But I think you know who did. I think you've been in contact with other survivors. That you're part of a conspiracy, just as we suspected 20 years ago. That's enough. Dacian moved between them, his presence suddenly overwhelming every inch the Alpha King. You have no evidence linking my physician to this incident. Only speculation and prejudice. Unless you can produce actual proof, I can produce this. Revna pulled out a second item, a small vial of liquid that glowed faintly silver in the darkness. Essence extracted from the examination cell. We use specialized methods to identify magical signatures. This essence, she looked directly at Marin, matches yours perfectly. Same bloodline, same family markers. Whoever escaped those cells is your direct relative. The room tilted. Marin grabbed the edge of the desk for support, her mind reeling. Direct relative meant immediate family. But her parents were dead, she'd watched them burn. Her sister had been 7, too young to survive alone. Unless... My sister, she whispered. Kessa. She was 7 during the purge. I saw them take her, saw the flames. But you never saw a body? Revna finished, her smile cold with triumph. How convenient. The last deep blood in hiding. And now we discover, she has a sister who's been imprisoned for months, growing increasingly unstable from isolation and church interrogation. A sister she never mentioned, never tried to free, until you were important enough to matter, a new voice said from the window. They all spun. A figure crouched on the window ledge impossibly high for anyone to reach without wings or magic. She was gaunt to the point of emaciation, her skin marked with burn scars that could only come from prolonged iron exposure, but her eyes blazed with silver light, pure and undiluted deep blood essence. And despite 15 years and terrible transformation, Marin recognized her little sister. Kessa, she breathed. Hello, Marin. Kessa's voice was wrong, too harsh, too old for someone who should be 22. I've been looking for you for so long, ever since they finally let me out of my cell. She tilted her head, and the movement was subtly off, predatory in a way deep bloods weren't meant to be. I killed them all, you know, every inquisitor who put iron to my skin. Every guard who held me down while they tested my limits. I killed them slowly, using everything Mother taught us, every pressure point that brings agony, every technique to keep someone conscious while they bleed. Kessa, please. Maren started forward, but Dacian caught her arm. That's not your sister, he said quietly. Not anymore. I can smell it, her essence is corrupted. Twisted by pain and rage until it became something else. Something better. Kessa corrected, her smile sharp as broken glass. The church wanted to know how much we could endure. Turns out, quite a lot. And we learned such interesting things when pushed past our breaking point. Like how to heal or not heal, how to make pain last forever, how to turn our gift for life into mastery over death. She jumped down from the window with impossible grace, landing in a crouch. Where her feet touched the floor, the stone cracked and darkened, life force draining from the very material. I've come for you, sister. It's time to stop hiding. Stop pretending to be their pet healer. Time to show them what deep bloods really are when we stop being merciful. Revna moved, iron chains whipping toward Kessa with practiced precision, but Kessa was faster, flowing around the attack like water. Her hand caught Revna's wrist, and the Inquisitor screamed as her life force began to drain not just blood, but the vital essence that kept her alive. Stop! Maren lunged forward, placing her hands on both her sister and the Inquisitor. Her own power flared instinctively, creating a barrier that disrupted Kessa's drain. Let her go. This isn't who we are. This isn't what Mother taught us. Mother's lessons kept us weak. Kessa released Revna, who collapsed gasping. But her silver eyes fixed on Maren with disturbing intensity. Mother's mercy got her killed. But you're different now, aren't you? I can feel it, you've been touching him. She gestured at Dacian. An alpha wolf. Do you know what we could do with access to that kind of power? The things we could accomplish? I won't help you kill, Maren said firmly. If you want revenge, I understand. But this path isn't a path. It's what I've become. Kessa's expression softened slightly, showing a glimpse of the child she'd been. They broke something in me, Maren. Something that can't be fixed. But together, we could break them back. Make them pay for what they did to our family. The people who ordered the purge are dead. Dacian interjected, his voice calm despite his ready stance. Queen Helena died 8 years ago. Her council was disbanded. Killing innocents now won't bring justice, only more pain. Kessa laughed, bitter and broken. Innocents? There are no innocents. Everyone in this city benefited from our genocide. They took our lands, our knowledge, our sacred places, and turned them into common hospitals and barracks. They wear our crystallized essence as jewelry. Her eyes fixed on Revna's pendant, now cracked and dark. They make trophies of our dead. You're right, Maren said, quietly. They do. And it's wrong. And it's evil. And I've wanted revenge every single day for 15 years. But Kessa. She stepped closer, ignoring Dacian's warning growl. If we become monsters to fight monsters, we prove them right. We prove the church was justified in fearing us. I don't care about justification. Kessa's voice broke on the last word. I care that I spent 12 years in a cell being tortured because of what I was born as. I care that no one came for me, that my own sister lived free while I screamed in the dark. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Because it was true, Maren had survived by being invisible, by not drawing attention, by not risking herself to search for other survivors. She'd assumed everyone was dead because it was easier than living with the guilt of not saving them. I'm sorry, she whispered. Kessa, I'm so sorry. I thought you were gone. I thought I was alone. If I'd known. But you didn't know. Didn't look. Didn't risk your comfortable hiding place to check. Kessa's form began to shimmer, her control slipping as emotion overwhelmed her. Well, I'm here now. And you have a choice, sister. Join me. Help me make them pay. Or stand aside and watch me burn this city down around the people who destroyed us. Or, Dacian said, his alpha power filling the room with undeniable authority. You accept my offer of sanctuary. Royal protection. Like your sister. a chance to heal from what was done to you, rather than spreading that damage to others. Kessa's laugh was pure madness. Protection from an alpha king? Your mother started this. Your bloodline is soaked in ours. Why would I trust you? Because I can smell truth, and everything your sister told me about the genocide was verified by my mother's own records. Because I've spent 5 years trying to undo her damage. Because, he glanced at Marin, because your sister saved my life, and I owe her more than I can repay. Let me extend that debt to you. For a moment, Kessa wavered. Marin saw the conflict in her sister's eyes, the child who'd loved and trusted, warring with the creature torture had created. Then Revna coughed, struggling to her feet. Your Majesty, you cannot give sanctuary to a confessed murderer. The Church. The Church, Kessa hissed, her decision made, can burn. She moved in a blur, her corrupted deep blood speed carrying her straight at the Inquisitor. Dacian intercepted, his partial shift making him fast enough to match her, but Kessa twisted away. I'll give you 3 days, Marin, she called as she leaped back to the window. 3 days to decide if you're with me or against me. Choose wisely. I'd hate to have to kill the only family I have left. Then she was gone, vanishing into the night. The silence she left behind was deafening. Revna straightened, her hand pressed to her throat, where Kessa's touch had left a withering mark. Your Majesty, she said hoarsely, you just witnessed an attack by a confessed murderer. You heard her threaten the city. You must let the Church hunt her down. What I witnessed, Dacian replied coldly, was a victim of Church torture having a breakdown. You want to hunt her? Fine, but you'll do it according to law, not Church doctrine. Any deep blood captured alive will be brought to me for judgment, not disappeared into your examination cells. The law states that unnatural creatures are protected under the Sanctuary Clause if they seek royal refuge. Marin interrupted, her mind racing. She'd studied every law that might protect her, memorized every loophole. It's an old statute, but never repealed. Any being, regardless of nature, can seek the king's protection. If Kessa formally requests sanctuary, she just threatened to burn down the city, Revna snarled. Under duress, after 12 years of torture, Dacian's voice was iron. Which brings up interesting questions about the Church's examination methods. Questions I intend to investigate thoroughly. He turned to his guards. Escort Inquisitor Coldwater to guest chambers. Comfortable ones. She'll be staying in the palace as my guest until we sort this situation out. You're imprisoning me? Revna's eyes blazed with fury. I'm ensuring your safety. If Kessa returns, you're her primary target. Consider it protective custody. His smile was all teeth. I'm sure you understand. As guards escorted a protesting Revna from the room, Dacian turned to Marin. The moment they were alone, his alpha authority faded, leaving only concern. Are you all right? Marin shook her head, still staring at the window where her sister had vanished. She's alive. All these years, she was alive and suffering, and I did nothing. You didn't know. I should have looked harder. Should have risked. And you'd both be dead. He stepped closer, his presence grounding. Marin, you were 12. You survived the only way you could. That's not cowardice, that's survival. She's going to kill people. Innocent people who had nothing to do with what happened to her. Maybe. He caught her chin gently, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. Or maybe, if we move fast, we can find her first. Offer real sanctuary, real healing. She's in pain, not evil. There's a difference. You don't know that. You saw what she became. I saw what trauma made her. That's not the same as what she is. His thumb traced her cheek, the gesture unbearably tender. Trust me, I know something about being judged for the monster you might become rather than the person you're trying to be. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to think they could save Kessa, fix this, have some kind of happy ending. But she'd seen her sister's eyes, the corruption in her essence that came from using deep blood gifts not to heal but to harm. That kind of transformation wasn't easily undone. 3 days, she said. We have 3 days to find her before she makes good on her threat. Then we'd better start searching. But as Marin looked out at the dark city, she knew it wouldn't be enough time. Kessa had spent 12 years learning to hide, to survive, to hunt. She'd become everything the church feared deep bloods could be. And Marin was going to have to choose between saving her sister and saving the city that had benefited from her family's genocide. Some choices, she was learning, had no right answer. The next 2 days passed in a blur of frantic searching. Dacian deployed his best trackers. Marin tried to sense her sister's life force signature, and the City Watch turned the lower districts inside out, looking for any sign of the rogue deep blood. They found nothing but rumors and panic. A woman with silver eyes seen near the old healing sanctuaries, mysterious deaths in the night of known church informants, shadows that moved wrong in the lamplight. Kessa was hunting, methodically eliminating anyone connected to the purge, anyone who'd profited from deep blood land seizures, anyone unlucky enough to get in her way. The body count rose with each passing hour. On the third morning, Marin stood on the palace walls watching smoke rise from the lower city, where another fire had broken out during the night. 20 dead this time, including several families with children. The pattern was getting worse, less targeted. Kessa was losing whatever control she'd retained. "We're out of time," Dacian said quietly, joining her on the wall. He hadn't slept in 2 days. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of every death, his failure to stop. "The council is demanding I authorize the church to use extreme measures. Revna is screaming about delayed response, enabling terrorism. The people are afraid, and they're right to be." "She's my sister," Marin whispered. "I can't just let them kill her. And I can't let her keep killing innocents." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "There has to be another way. Some way to reach her, to break through the corruption." A messenger ran up, breathless and pale. "Your Majesty, there's been a message from the creature. She's taken hostages at the old Deep Blood Sanctuary in the Eastern District. Says she'll release them if healer Marin comes alone to meet her." Marin was moving before the messenger finished speaking. Dacian caught her arm. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap. She's my sister. She knows exactly how to manipulate me." Marin pulled free. "But those hostages are real, and they'll die if I don't go. This ends today, one way or another." "Then I'm coming with you," she said alone. "I don't care." His eyes blazed gold with alpha authority. "You're under my protection, which means you don't walk into death traps without backup. We go together, or we send in the full guard. Your choice." She wanted to argue, but the stubborn set of his jaw told her it would be pointless. Besides, some selfish part of her was glad facing Kessa alone terrified her, more than she wanted to admit. "Together," she agreed. "But we go in peace. No weapons, no guards. Just conversation. A chance to reach her. And if conversation fails?" Marin looked at the smoke rising from the lower city, at the fresh graves being dug in the commons, at the fear in every face on the streets below. "Then I'll do what has to be done, even if it destroys me." The old Deep Blood Sanctuary had once been a place of light and healing, a sprawling complex of gardens and meditation halls, where her people had trained new healers and researched cures for impossible diseases. Now it was a burnt shell, destroyed during the purge, and left to rot as a warning against unnatural practices. Marin hadn't set foot here in 15 years. Walking through the ruined gates felt like stepping into a grave. Kessa waited in what had been the central healing chamber. Bodies hung from the walls, not dead, but suspended in some kind of stasis, their life forces barely flickering. Hostages, kept alive, but helpless. 24 of them, at least, including several children. "You came," Kessa said, turning to face them. She looked worse than 3 days ago, her skin grayer, her eyes burning with feverish intensity, her control over her own form slipping. She was consuming her own life force to sustain the corruption, literally burning herself out from the inside. "And you brought the wolf. How touching." "Let them go, Kessa," Marin said, keeping her voice calm. "They're innocents. They have nothing to do with what happened to us." "There are no innocents," Kessa gestured at the suspended bodies. "That woman there? Her father testified at the Deep Blood trials, claimed we'd poisoned his livestock. Lie that helped justify the purge. That man? He bought our family's healing sanctuary at auction for a fraction of its worth, turned it into a stable. Those children? They attend schools built on the graves of our people. Everyone is guilty. Everyone benefits from our genocide. Then what do you want? Dacian asked. Justice? Revenge? To make the world hurt the way you've been hurt? I want her. Kessa pointed at Marin. My sister, who abandoned me, who lived free while I suffered. I want her to feel what I felt, to understand what they did to us. She moved, and iron chains erupted from the walls, the same chains that had bound her in the church's cells, now wielded as weapons. They wrapped around Marin's wrists and ankles, burning on contact, searing through skin to the deep blood essence beneath. Marin screamed. The pain was incredible. Iron didn't just burn, it disrupted, tearing at the very core of what she was. She felt her life force beginning to unravel, to scatter like light through broken glass. Dacian lunged forward, but Kessa was ready. More chains caught him, wrapped around his torso and throat. Not iron, these were blessed silver, specifically designed to weaken werewolves. He snarled, fighting against them, but they tightened with every struggle. There, Kessa said with satisfaction. Now you understand. This is what they did to me. Day after day, year after year. Chains that burned. Prayers that felt like acid in my veins. Endless questions about deep blood secrets I didn't know because I was a child when they took me. Kessa, please. Marin gasped through the pain. This isn't you. You were gentle. You cried when butterflies died. You wanted to heal every wounded animal we found. That person is still inside you. That person died in those cells? Kessa's voice broke. She screamed and begged and prayed for someone to save her, and no one came. So she made herself into something that didn't need saving, something that could never be hurt again, by becoming the thing that hurt others. Dacian's voice was strained but steady, by proving the church right that deep bloods were dangerous, that you needed to be controlled. They were always going to fear us. Nothing we did mattered. Kessa turned to Marin. You tried to be harmless, to hide, to serve. Did that save Mother? Father? Did your mercy protect anyone? At least my way. I make them pay. And then what? Marin forced the words out through waves of pain. You kill everyone connected to the purge? Everyone who benefited? That's half the city. Then you move to the next city, and the next? Spend your life as a monster until someone finally puts you down? Is that the future you want? I don't have a future. The admission ripped from Kessa like a wound. Look at me. I'm consuming my own essence to maintain this form. The corruption is eating me alive. I have weeks, maybe months before I burn out completely. So yes, I'll spend that time making them pay. Making them remember that deep bloods existed, that we mattered, that you can't just erase a people and expect no consequences. Then let me help you, Marin pleaded. I'm a healer, Kessa. I can try to stabilize you, purge the corruption. It's too late. For purging. Kessa's laugh was bitter. The corruption isn't separate from me anymore. It's woven into everything I am. Removing it would be like trying to separate water from a river. I'd dissolve completely. Then we find another way. There is no other way, Kessa screamed. Don't you understand? I'm dead already. I'm just choosing how to spend my last days. And I choose to make them burn. She raised her hands, and Marin felt it, her sister gathering power, preparing to drain the life force from every hostage simultaneously. A mass killing that would send a message the church couldn't ignore, that would start a war between humans and any surviving supernatural beings. If you do this, Dacian said quietly, you'll doom your sister. The church will come for her next. They'll use your actions to justify a new purge, a new genocide. Everything Marin has built, every life she's saved, will mean nothing because you made them right to fear us. Kessa's hands wavered. She can escape. Go into deeper hiding. There is no deeper hiding, Marin said. Not after this. Dacian was right. We're linked. Your actions reflect on me, mine on you. We're the last deep bloods. What we do now defines how our people are remembered. As healers or as killers, as victims or as monsters. I'm tired of being a victim, Kessa whispered. Then be a survivor instead. Marin fought against the chains, even as they burned deeper. Help me show them what deep bloods really were. Not weapons, not threats, just people with a gift we tried to use for good. Let me heal these hostages, show them what our power is truly for. Let our legacy be mercy, not massacre. For a long moment, Kessa stood frozen, torn between vengeance and the memory of who she'd been. Marin could see the war in her sister's eyes, the corrupted creature fighting against the dying ember of the gentle child. Then Kessa's hands dropped. I can't, she said brokenly. I want to, Marin. I want to be the person you remember. But I look at them, at these humans who sleep safe in beds while I screamed in darkness, and all I feel is rage. The corruption isn't something done to me, it's what I chose to become to survive. And I can't unchoose it now. She turned toward the hostages, power gathering around her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I'm not strong enough to be better. Marin made her choice. She released her own power, not the careful, subtle healing she'd used for 15 years, but everything. Her full deep blood essence unleashed without restraint, blazing like a star-going supernova. The iron chains couldn't hold her true nature, not when she stopped trying to compress herself into human limits. She shattered the chains and threw herself between Kessa and the hostages. If you're going to drain them, she said, her form now fully deep-blood translucent skin showing constellations of light within, hair flowing like liquid silver, eyes blazing with pure life force, you'll have to go through me. Kessa stared at her transformed sister. Marin, move. I don't want to hurt you. Then don't hurt anyone. Marin spread her arms wide. You want to make them pay? Make me pay. I'm the one who failed you. I'm the one who hid while you suffered. Take my life force, drain me completely if that's what you need. But leave them alone. No. Dacian's voice was strained as he fought against his own chains. Marin, don't. It's the only way. She kept her eyes on her sister. Kessa needs resolution. Needs to feel like someone paid for what happened to her. So let it be me. Let her sister's sacrifice mean something. Sacrifice? Kessa's voice broke. You think I want that? You think I survived 12 years of hell just to kill the only family I have left? I think you're in pain, Marin said gently. Pain so deep it's destroyed everything else. And I think maybe, if someone finally acknowledges that pain, accepts responsibility for failing, you might find a way to let go of some of that rage. It's not your fault. Tears streamed down Kessa's face, the first real emotion beyond rage Marin had seen in her. You were a child. You couldn't have saved me. But I can save you now. Marin stepped closer, within arm's reach. Not your body, I know that's beyond me. But maybe your soul, your memory, what you're remembered as. Let me take your pain, Kessa. Let me carry it for both of us. And in exchange, let these people live. Let them tell the story of the deep blood, who could have killed them but chose mercy instead. Let that be your legacy. Kessa's power wavered, flickered. I don't know how to be merciful anymore. Then let me show you. Marin reached out and took her sister's hands, ignoring the corruption that tried to drain her life force on contact. She pushed back with her own essence, not fighting but embracing, absorbing the pain, the rage, the agonized memories of 12 years in hell. It was like swallowing fire. Kessa's experiences flooded into her every moment of torture. Every prayer screamed into darkness. Every day hope died a little more. The weight of it threatened to crush Marin's mind, to corrupt her essence the same way it had destroyed her sister's. But she held on. Because this was what healers did, they took pain into themselves and transformed it into something bearable. And she was the last deep-blood healer. If she couldn't heal her own sister, what was her gift worth? Let go, she whispered. Kessa, please, let go of the rage. You've carried it long enough. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, slowly, Kessa's grip loosened. The corruption began to bleed away, flowing into Marin, leaving Kessa's essence purer. Not healed, too much damage had been done, but clearer, lighter. I'm so tired, Kessa whispered. I'm so tired of hurting. I know. Marin pulled her sister into an embrace, ignoring the way Kessa's form flickered and faded. You can. Rest now. Let me carry this for you. The hostages. I'll heal them. I'll make sure they remember you as more than a monster. Kessa sagged against her, and Marin felt it, her sister's life force finally giving out, the corruption having consumed too much of her essence to sustain even this fragile existence. She was dying, had been dying since the moment she escaped those cells. Tell them, Kessa breathed, her voice fading. Tell them a deep-blood girl loved butterflies, that she wanted to heal the world, that she was good before they broke her. I will. I promise. Kessa smiled a real smile, the first one Marin had seen in 15 years. You were always the strong one. I just got lost for a while. Then her form dissolved completely, her life force scattering like dandelion seeds on the wind. Not destroyed but released, returning to the natural cycle she'd tried so hard to escape. Marin held empty air, and wept. The chains fell away, as Kessa's power dissipated. Dacian staggered to his feet and crossed to Marin, pulling her trembling form against him. She clung to him like a drowning woman, her grief crashing through her in waves. She's gone, she whispered. She's really gone. I know. I'm sorry. He held her tight, his wolf recognizing the depth of her pain and responding with comfort on an instinctive level. But there was no time for grief. The hostages were still suspended, their life forces fading rapidly without Kessa's active maintenance. Marin pulled away from Dacian, wiping her eyes. I need to heal them, now, before it's too late. You just absorbed your sister's corruption. Your essence is strong enough. She turned to the suspended bodies, spreading her hands. I have to be. She reached out with her power, touching each life force gently. The corruption Kessa had left in them, the draining effect was easy to reverse. She simply gave back what her sister had taken, replenishing their strength, knitting torn life force back together. But the corruption within her was harder to manage. It burned through her veins like acid, whispering suggestions of violence, showing her all the ways she could make the humans pay for what they'd done. She could drain them, kill them, prove that deep bloods were as dangerous as the church claimed. Instead, she channeled it into healing. Took the rage and pain and transformed it into medicine. Every dark impulse became fuel for restoration, every vengeful thought converted into life-giving energy. It was agonizing, like forcing poison to become antidote through sheer will. But she was Marin Whitewood, daughter of Iris the Merciful, last of the healing caste. This was what she was for. One by one, the hostages woke. Confused, frightened, but alive and whole. They stared at the glowing deep blood before them with awe and terror in equal measure. Go, Marin said, her voice echoing strangely in her transformed state. Return to your families. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them a deep blood healed you. They fled, stumbling through the ruins of the sanctuary. When the last one was gone, Marin's knees buckled. Dacian caught her before she hit the ground. I can feel it, she gasped. The corruption. It's trying to take root, to change me like it changed her. Then we purge it. He pressed his forehead to hers. Together, my wolf and your light, like before, when you healed me, balance. Dacian, if this goes wrong, it won't. His certainty was absolute. I won't let it. You saved my life. Now let me save yours. He shifted, not fully, but into that in-between state where his alpha nature rose closest to the surface. His wolf's primal energy surrounded them both, dark and wild and ancient. It should have been anathema to her deep blood essence, hostile to her very nature. Instead, it felt like coming home. She let her own power rise completely, no more hiding, no more restraint. Her deep blood essence blazed like a sun, pure life, force made manifest. And where it touched Dacian's wolf darkness, something impossible happened. They merged, not destroying each other, not canceling out, but combining. Light and shadow interweaving. Life force and predatory power, balancing into something that had never existed before. The corruption within her couldn't survive the transformation. It was designed to thrive in isolation, in pain, in corrupted deep blood essence. But this new combined energy was too pure, too balanced to sustain it. The corruption burned away, like morning fog before sunrise. But the transformation didn't stop there. Energy exploded outward from them, washing across the ruined sanctuary. Where it touched, things changed. Dead gardens began to bloom with flowers that glowed silver and shadow dark. Broken walls knit back together, but instead of pure stone, they became something new, alive somehow, breathing, warm to the touch. The very air shifted, becoming charged with an energy that was neither purely natural nor purely magical, but something between. Throughout Valehaven, people felt it, a pulse of pure power that spoke of change and possibility. In the palace, Revna clutched her burned throat and felt the corruption there heal completely. In the lower city, those injured in Kessa's attacks found their wounds closing. Children born with traces of magical heritage felt their gifts stabilize, no longer the dangerous unknown, but something they could understand and control. The old boundaries were dissolving. Human and magical, natural and supernatural, all the lines that had kept species separate and fearful were blurring. And at the center of it all, Marin and Dacian stood transformed. Not fully deep blood or fully wolf. Not human but not entirely other. Something new. Something balanced. "What did we do?" Marin whispered, staring at her hands still translucent but shot through with shadow now, still glowing but with a darker edge. "Changed everything," Dacian replied, his voice holding harmonics that hadn't been there before, his form more solid than his shifted state but still holding wolf edges. "The old stories were right. Deep bloods and alpha wolves weren't meant to be enemies. We're complementary forces, and when we finally stop fighting each other, we become something neither could be alone." She looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as king or alpha or potential threat, but as the other half of something ancient and essential. "We can't go back." "No," he agreed, "but maybe we can go forward." He kissed her then, and where their lips met, the transformation completed. The mate bond, that pull they'd both been fighting, snapped into place fully, not a chain but a bridge, connecting their essences on a level deeper than blood or magic. When they finally pulled apart, the ruined sanctuary had transformed completely into a living temple, walls breathing, gardens blooming with impossible flowers, air itself humming with balanced energy. A place where healing and strength combined, where life force and predatory power found harmony. "The church won't accept this," Marin said quietly. "Revna will use it as proof that we're dangerous, that mixing humans and magical beings is abomination. Let her try." Dacian's eyes blazed with gold and silver both. "We just proved something that terrifies them more than any monster, that cooperation is more powerful than segregation, that the old boundaries don't have to hold." A throat cleared behind them. They turned to find Revna herself standing in the sanctuary entrance, flanked by church guards. But her expression wasn't the triumph Marin expected. Instead, she looked uncertain. "Your Majesty," the Inquisitor said slowly, her hand unconsciously touching her healed throat. "The Church Council requires an explanation for the magical surge that just swept the city. And for this?" She gestured at the transformed sanctuary, at Marin and Dacian's altered forms. "The explanation is simple, Inquisitor." Dacian's voice held unquestionable authority. "The old ways failed. Segregation and persecution created the very monsters you feared. So we're trying something new: integration instead of elimination. Healing instead of hunting. Balance instead of genocide. The Church can adapt or become irrelevant." His alpha power filled the space. "Because this transformation? It's not just here, it's spreading. Everyone in the city felt it. And they're not afraid, they're curious. Hopeful. Ready for change." Revna stared at them for a long moment. Then, slowly, she removed the iron chains from her waist and let them fall. "The corruption you healed in me," she said quietly, "came from my own hatred. My own fear. I felt it burn away when your power touched me, and I understood." She stopped, struggling with words. "The church taught me that magical beings were evil, but you saved my life twice now. Once from Kessa. Once from the poison her touch left in me." "Why?" "Because it's what we do," Marin said simply. "Deep bloods heal, it's our nature. Even when it's people who hate us, who persecuted us, we heal because that's who we are." Revna's ice-chip eyes softened fractionally. "I've spent 20 years enforcing the church's doctrine. Hunting, questioning, executing anyone suspected of magical taint. I told myself it was for the greater good, for human safety. But standing here, feeling your power knitting wounds I didn't even know I carried. She shook her head. I don't know if I can be what the church wants me to be anymore. Then be something else, Dacian suggested. Help us build this new world instead of fighting to preserve the old one. The High Council will resist. Many in the church still believe. Then let them resist. But you, Inquisitor Coldwater, what do you believe? Revna looked at her guards, at the transformed sanctuary, at Marin still glowing with balanced deep blood and wolf essence. Finally, she knelt not in submission, but in acknowledgement. I believe, she said slowly, that I've been wrong. That the church has been wrong. And that if a tortured deep blood's last act could still be to spare hostages, if a healer who lost everything can still choose mercy, then perhaps the monsters aren't the ones with magic in their veins. She rose, meeting Dacian's eyes. I'll return to the church. Tell them what I witnessed. Some will listen, many won't, but at least the conversation will begin. That's all we ask. Dacian offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Revna took it. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it has to start somewhere. As the Inquisitor and her guards departed, Marin sagged against Dacian, exhaustion finally catching up with her. He supported her easily, his enhanced strength more than equal to the task. We did it, she murmured. Kessa's death meant something. The transformation worked. We actually might survive this. More than survive. He kissed her temple. We're going to change everything, starting with finally acknowledging what we are to each other. And what are we? She looked up at him, seeing her own transformation reflected in his altered eyes. Mates. Partners. The beginning of something new. He smiled. If you'll have me, healer. I know I come with significant baggage, a kingdom in crisis, a church that wants you dead, and a very possessive wolf that considers you its other half. Despite everything, Marin laughed. I come with my own baggage, 15 years of trauma, a people's genocide on my conscience, and enough power to accidentally kill or heal you without meaning to. Perfect. We'll be disasters together. His expression sobered. But seriously, Marin, I know this is fast. I know you didn't ask for any of this, not the exposure, not the mate bond, not the transformation. If you need time... She stopped his words with a kiss. I've spent 15 years hiding, being invisible, playing it safe. I'm done hiding. Whatever we are now, whatever we're becoming, I want to face it with you. The mate bond hummed with contentment, both their essences settling into new equilibrium. They weren't fully deep blood or fully wolf anymore. They were something unprecedented. Something that could maybe, finally, bridge the gap between magical and human, between feared and accepted. Come on, Dacian said, helping her toward the sanctuary exit. We should get you back to the palace. You need rest, food, and probably several medical evaluations to make sure you didn't damage yourself with that transformation. I'm fine, she protested, even as her legs threatened to give out. You're stubborn, he corrected. There's a difference. As they walked through the transformed sanctuary toward the waiting world beyond, Marin thought about Kessa, about her sister's last request to tell them she'd loved butterflies, that she'd been good before they broke her. She would tell them. Would make sure Kessa was remembered as more than the monster pain had created. Would build monuments not just to the dead but to the survivors, to those who'd fought through darkness and found light again. Behind them, impossible flowers bloomed. The age of hiding was over. The age of balance was just beginning, and Marin Whitewood, last of the Deep Bloods, walked toward it hand in hand with the Alpha King who'd recognized her truth and chosen love over fear. 6 months later, Marin stood in the renovated sanctuary, now officially the Temple of Balanced Healing, and watched students practice their gifts under careful supervision. Some were purely human, learning conventional medicine. Others showed traces of deep blood heritage, their abilities weak but present, awakened by the transformation that had swept through Valehaven. And a few were young werewolves, learning to control their shifts and use their enhanced senses for diagnostic purposes rather than hunting. They learned together, ate together, became friends despite everything the old world had taught them about separation and fear. It's working, Dacian said, slipping an arm around her waist. He could move silently when he wanted to, his wolf nature making him naturally stealthy. 6 months ago, this would have been impossible. Now look at them. Marin leaned into his warmth, still marveling at how natural it felt. The mate bond had only strengthened over time, their combined essence settling into comfortable harmony. She was still primarily deep-blood, he was still primarily alpha wolf, but they carried pieces of each other now balanced, complementary, stronger together than apart. Not everyone approves, she reminded him. The church's conservative faction is still calling for our execution. 3 assassination attempts in 5 months isn't exactly a ringing endorsement. True, but Revna's reform movement is gaining ground. A quarter of the church council now supports integration policies. That's progress. Revna Coldwater had returned to the church and immediately begun advocating for policy changes. She'd faced censure, demotion, even temporary excommunication. But she'd persisted, using her own transformation as evidence that magical beings weren't inherent threats. Some called her a heretic, others called her a visionary. Either way, she'd created space for conversation that hadn't existed before. What about the other kingdoms? Marin asked. I heard the Northern Territories are threatening war if we don't reverse the sanctuary policies. Let them threaten. Dacian's voice held grim humor. Our army is stronger now than it's ever been. Turns out having werewolves and deepbloods working together is remarkably effective. The healers can keep soldiers alive through injuries that would normally be fatal, and the wolves can, well, be wolves. We're becoming a power the other kingdoms can't ignore. By force? Marin pulled back to look at him. That's not what we wanted. We wanted acceptance, not conquest. We wanted survival, he corrected gently. Acceptance would be nice, but it's not guaranteed. So we build strength while offering peace. Show them cooperation is more beneficial than conflict. A student approached a young woman with silver-flecked eyes and hands that glowed faintly when she concentrated. Healer Marin, I'm struggling with the life force perception exercise. Everything feels so tangled. That's normal, Marin assured her, moving into teacher mode effortlessly. You're trying too hard. Don't force it, just let your awareness extend naturally. Feel for the rhythm, the pulse of living energy. It's like listening to a heartbeat, but deeper. She guided the girl through the exercise, her own enhanced senses, showing her exactly where the student was going wrong. Teaching had become her new purpose, training a generation that wouldn't have to hide, that could use their gifts openly and proudly. Dacian watched her work with undisguised pride. 6 months ago, she'd been a hidden healer, terrified of exposure. Now she was the realm's foremost authority on deep blood abilities, training new healers, and advising on integration policies. The transformation had been remarkable. Your Majesty, a messenger burst into the temple, breathless and wide-eyed. News from the eastern border. They've found others. More deep blood survivors. A whole community hiding in the mountain valleys. Marin's heart stopped. How many? At least 30, maybe more. They've been living in isolation since the purge, afraid to make contact. But word of the sanctuary reached them, and they're asking for safe passage to Valehaven. She looked at Dacian, hope and fear warring in her chest. More survivors. I'm not the last. You were never the last, he said softly. Just the first brave enough to step into the light. They made arrangements immediately safe escort for the deep blood refugees, prepared housing in the temple complex, integration specialists, to help them adjust to a world that had changed dramatically in 20 years. Within a week, the first group arrived. Marin stood in the temple courtyard and watched them file through the gates, thin, wary, scarred by years of hiding and fear, but alive. Gloriously, impossibly alive. An older woman separated from the group, her deep blood form flickering between translucent light and human disguise. She stopped in front of Marin, eyes widening with recognition. Marin? Little Marin Whitewood? Her voice cracked. By the ancient powers, you're alive. Aunt Thera? Marin barely remembered her, a distant relative who'd visited occasionally before the purge. I thought everyone was gone. We thought the same about you. Thera pulled her into a fierce embrace. All these years, hiding in the mountains, certain we were the last. And here you are, not just alive but thriving, building this. She gestured at the temple, at the mixed students, at the impossible reality before her. How? By refusing to stay hidden, Marin said simply. By finding someone willing to stand with me instead of against me. By proving that the old boundaries don't have to hold. She introduced them to Dacian, to the temple structure, to the new world they were building. Some of the refugees wept with relief. Others remained suspicious, too traumatized by 20 years of persecution to trust easily. But they stayed, they learned. They began, slowly, to hope. A year after the transformation, Valehaven hosted its first interspecies council. Representatives from human kingdoms, werewolf packs, the church, and newly discovered magical communities gathered to discuss integration policies, trade agreements, and mutual defense. It was chaos. Arguments erupted hourly. Ancient prejudices surfaced constantly. At one point, a werewolf representative nearly challenged a church official to a duel over a perceived insult. But they talked. They negotiated. They found, slowly and painfully, common ground. Marin and Dacian presided over the proceedings, their combined authority as leaders of the integration movement, making them natural mediators. They'd been formally bonded 3 months ago, a ceremony that combined werewolf-claiming rituals with deep blood essence joining, witnessed by thousands. The scandal had been magnificent. "I never thought I'd see this," Revna Coldwater said during a brief recess. She'd been promoted to church ambassador for magical relations, a new position created specifically for her reform work. "A year ago, I would have been leading the charge to burn this council to the ground. Now I'm helping facilitate it." "Change is possible," Marin replied, "even for those who seem most set in their ways." Speaking of change, Revna's gaze dropped to Marin's midsection, where a slight bulge was just beginning to show. "Congratulations. I heard the rumors but wasn't sure if they were true." Marin's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where new life was growing, a child that would be both deep blood and wolf, human and other, a living symbol of integration. "It's true, due in 6 months. The first hybrid child born openly in centuries." Revna shook her head in wonder. "The implications are terrifying and amazing in equal measure," Dacian finished, joining them. His hand found Marin's, their fingers intertwining automatically. "But we'll face them together, as we've faced everything else." The council resumed. Slowly, painfully, they hammered out the Treaty of Balanced Coexistence, a framework for integration that preserved cultural identities while encouraging cooperation. It wasn't perfect. It left many questions unanswered, many conflicts unresolved. But it was a beginning. 5 years after the transformation, Marin stood in her private chambers and watched her daughter play with shadow puppets, shapes that were half light, half darkness, impossible and beautiful. Little Iris, named for Marin's mother, was 4 years old and showed abilities that terrified and delighted in equal measure. She could sense life forces like a deep blood, had the enhanced strength of a young werewolf, and occasionally demonstrated abilities that seemed to belong to neither heritage. She was something entirely new. And she wasn't alone. Dozens of hybrid children had been born in the years since integration began, each one unique, each one carrying potential that previous generations had feared. Dacian entered, fresh from a council meeting, and swept Iris up in his arms. She squealed with delight, her form flickering between states as her emotions surged. "Careful, little star," he cautioned gently. "Remember what your mother taught you about control." "But control is boring," Iris protested. "I want to make big shadows, big lights, show everyone what I can do." "You will," Marin assured her, taking her from Dacian's arms. "When you're older and have better mastery. For now, small shadows and lights are plenty impressive." She settled Iris with a book and turned to Dacian. "How was the council meeting?" "Productive. The Northern Territories have agreed to open their first integration temple. Trade with the Eastern Kingdoms has increased 30%, and," he paused, his expression complex, "they've officially repealed the genocide order. The church issued a formal apology for the deep blood purge." Marin's breath caught. 25 years after her family's murder, the church had finally acknowledged their crime. It didn't bring anyone back, didn't undo the trauma or erase the scars. But it was something. "Kessa should have lived to see this," she whispered. "She did, in a way." Dacian pulled her close. Every person we heal carries a piece of her sacrifice. Every hybrid child born freely represents the future she died helping create. She's not forgotten, Marin. She's part of the foundation we're building. On. They'd built a memorial for Kessa in the temple gardens, not a statue of the monster she'd become, but of the child she'd been. A little girl with flowers in her hair, reaching out to touch a butterfly. Beneath it, an inscription: she loved healing until they broke her. Remember the child, mourn the loss, learn from the tragedy. Students visited it daily, left offerings, told stories about not letting pain transform them into weapons. Kessa's death had become a teaching moment, not about the dangers of magical beings, but about the consequences of persecution and the importance of healing trauma before it festered into corruption. What do we tell Iris? Marin asked. About her aunt who died before she was born? About the genocide that tried to erase half her heritage? The truth, Dacian said simply. All of it, the beautiful and the terrible. She needs to understand what we've come from, to appreciate what we're building, and to be vigilant about protecting it. Because the integration was fragile still. Conservative factions in every community pushed back against change. Incidents occurred: violence between species, discrimination disguised as policy, fear manifesting as hatred. The work wasn't finished. Might never be truly finished. But it was possible now in a way it hadn't been before. Children like Iris could grow up without hiding, without choosing between halves of their heritage. That alone made all the struggle worthwhile. 10 years after the transformation, Marin gave her keynote address at the first Interkingdom Healing Conference. Representatives from 15 realms attended, eager to learn integration techniques and balanced healing methods. 10 years ago, she began, looking out at the diverse crowd: humans, werewolves, deep bloods, and hybrids all mixed together. I was hiding in a charity hospital, terrified of exposure, certain that if anyone discovered what I was, I'd be executed. I'd spent 15 years invisible, believing survival meant staying small and unnoticed. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Then, everything changed, not because I suddenly became brave, but because circumstances forced a choice: hide and let others die, or reveal myself and risk everything. I chose risk, and I discovered something remarkable. The stories we tell ourselves about what's possible are often wrong. We're taught that different species can't coexist, that our natures are fundamentally incompatible. But sitting in this room right now are werewolf healers, deep blood warriors, human mages, and hybrid diplomats. We've proven that the old boundaries were artificial. That cooperation isn't just possible, it's powerful. I won't pretend it's been easy. We've faced resistance, violence, betrayal. We've lost people, made mistakes. There are still kingdoms that refuse integration, communities that cling to segregation. But we've also built something unprecedented, a society where a child can be both wolf and deep blood and human, where healing isn't restricted to one species, where strength comes from diversity rather than uniformity. She looked at Dacian, standing at the back of the hall with Iris, now 10 years old and frighteningly powerful, beside him. We've proven that the greatest transformations begin when we refuse to accept the limitations others place on us, when we choose connection over isolation, when we heal rather than harm, even when harm would be easier. The applause was thunderous. After the keynote, attendees flooded forward with questions, seeking advice, sharing their own integration stories. Marin answered until her voice grew hoarse, energized by their enthusiasm. Late that night, alone with Dacian in their private chambers, she finally let exhaustion show. 10 years, she murmured, leaning against him. Sometimes it feels like yesterday I was grinding valerian root in that hospital, trying to be invisible. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Because you're not the same person. He kissed her temple. That frightened healer hiding in the charity hospital couldn't have imagined giving keynote addresses or training the next generation or raising a hybrid daughter. You've transformed as much as the world around you. We've transformed, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. True. We're rather impressive together. His tone was light, but his eyes held serious warmth. Ready for the next 10 years? The Council wants to expand integration efforts to the southern continents. Revna's proposing a unified magical human defense force. Iris keeps asking when she can start formal diplomatic training. So many plans. Marin smiled. 10 years ago, my only plan was to survive until tomorrow. Now we're building decades into the future. Is that a yes? It's a yes. She turned in his arms, meeting his gold and silver gaze. To all of it. The plans, the challenges, the impossible goals. To building something better than what came before. To raising a generation that won't have to hide who they are. To us. He added softly. To us. She agreed. They kissed as shadow and light played across the walls, their combined essence still working its subtle magic, still transforming the world one interaction at a time. Outside their window, Valehaven glowed with mixed lights, human lamps, and deep blood gardens and werewolf wards, all illuminating the darkness together. The city had become a beacon, proof that integration was possible. Other kingdoms watched and wondered. Some followed their example. Others resisted. But the possibility had been proven. The door had been opened, and Marin Whitewood, who'd once believed herself the last of the Deep Bloods, the final survivor of a genocide, had become something else entirely, a founder, a teacher, a leader, a mother. A living bridge between worlds that had been separate for too long. She'd worked as a healer in secret for 15 years, hiding her true nature, surviving by being invisible. Until a wounded Alpha King whispered her true name and changed everything. Now she healed in the open, training others, building a future where healing wasn't restricted by species or fear, where the next generation wouldn't have to choose between safety and authenticity. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined as a terrified 12-year-old fleeing the purge. But it was the one she'd fought for, bled for, nearly died for. And standing in her mate's arms, watching their impossible daughter practice shadow puppets in the next room, hearing the sounds of an integrated city thriving beyond their walls, Marin knew it had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every risk taken, every painful transformation, all of it had led here to healing in the light, rather than hiding in the dark. And that made all the difference.